I won't use the word out of respect. But you need to stop letting a word have power over you. And yes, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yes, just the tip. I swear, just the tip. Here's your damn rant show, folks. Greetings, I am E002 and welcome to That Damn Rant Show, brought to you by Sega. The more you play with it, the harder it gets. Anyway, tonight's issue tackles a subject I've been kind of avoiding for a while, but one that's important to me. The problem is, usually when a middle-aged straight white guy starts talking about racial or gender equality, it could go one of three really horrible ways. Number one, hippie. Can't we all just love each other, man? Hippie is in disbelief we still even have problems, and sometimes even states they don't exist. When that happens, hippie transforms into number two, not all men man. He's a hero of a zero, as in nobody likes him. His only contribution to any conversation is to adjust his fedora and sagely take a drag off of his e-cig while undermining the entire conversation with, not all men. In fact, sometimes that's all he fucking says. Even when no one says all men, he magically hears it on the ether and swoops in to basically stand up for himself and all mankind. Of course, if you mention this to not all men man, he might get angry and transform into anti-social justice warrior. He's loud, he's proud, he's standing up for the man. Usually Donald Trump, but the polls show that Trump is contagious. Anti-social justice warrior is looking for a fight. He's a racist, misogynistic douchebag that believes he is telling it like it is, and if we don't like it, then we can go fuck ourselves. And then he gets pissed when nobody wants to listen to him. Dude, you told us to fuck off, so we did, okay? So just fuck off yourself. So I have fully expected about 80% of you just to tune out based on one of those three biased assumptions. Of course, that makes you a complete fucking moron, but that's your problem. Therefore, I'm just going to lay it out on the line and give all of your remaining 20% something to think about. First off, if you honestly believe that only white people are capable of being racist, then you, my friend, are a racist. Racism is an attitude. It's a learned behavior, and the tendency towards being a racist is not automatically blocked by the amount of melanin in your skin cells. It is not blocked by the kind of music you listen to, the shape of the continent you were born on, or the ratio of vowels to consonants in your surname. A person of black heritage is just as capable of irrational hatred towards a white person based on their skin color alone as they believe we all are. All humans are capable of what we call racism. And as a side note, what we call racism is the very term racist is ignorant. Black people, Asian people, Middle Eastern people, Caucasian people, none of them are from a different race other than Caucasian. The race is called Homo sapien. There is no Negro race or Arabic race any more than there is an Oregonian or a Floridian race. There's no Coloradoan race. There's no intelligent reason to even call it a race war, because a war between races would indicate two separate entities. There's no such thing as a race war between two groups of the same fucking race. It's an idiotic concept sparked by the fact that some of our ancestors were hateful, idiotic people with what would be considered by today's standards less than a third grade education. You're basically using an ancient euphemism created over 100 years ago by a bunch of Eric Cartmans. Now, a week or two ago, the media blew its fucking gaskets over Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, who refused to stand during the national anthem at one of their games as a silent protest against police brutality towards the African American community. People are saying that he was disrespectful and that he's unpatriotic and he should not be allowed to play if he's not going to display the proper level of respect. First of all, fuck you in the ass for asking a black man to ever even consider standing for the national anthem. Have you ever actually read all the lyrics? All of them? Here, let me help you. In the third verse, we find the following stanza. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave o'er land of the free and home of the brave. During the War of 1812, the British offered amnesty and freedom to any slaves and their families that would help in the fight to keep the U.S. from invading Canada. After the British bombarded Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. When he wrote the words, no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, he was basically spunking his dungarees with pleasure at the death of slaves who had freed themselves. So the free and the brave that Key was writing about were all white folk. Now, this is all well and good as justification for saying that no person of color should have to stand for the anthem. But here's another thing to think about. Did all white people in the 1800s own slaves? Did all white people in the 1800s approve of or condone slavery? If your answer, as it should be, was no to those two questions, then don't you think it's kind of racist to blame the great-grandchildren of all those white people who opposed slavery for the fact that there were people who did own slaves? How can anyone in all good conscience decry a group of people for prejudice while simultaneously exhibiting bigotry and prejudice yourselves? You know, a lot of progress was made in the 1960s and 70s through the equal rights movement in educating people and helping to stamp out prejudice and bigotry. It really looked like we were well on our way to everybody coming together as a people until the 1990s, when political correctness started becoming a thing. On the surface, political correctness would seem to have had a benefit towards better and less hostile communication. But in practice, it has had quite the opposite effect. The idea of using the phrase differently abled instead of handicapped, or Asian American instead of Japanese or Chinese American, does absolutely nothing but add a layer of insincerity and condescension to the equation. It has become a war against words. What words we can say, what words we can't say, and the overabundance of overcautiousness and bogus civility that has become commonplace. Meanwhile, we're becoming more paranoid and timid as it escalates because nobody wants to step on anybody else's toes, but at the same time, everybody's getting their own feet crushed under the weight of the enforcers of PC, namely the media. That predominantly white news media that largely shapes public opinion and etiquette. Do you ever wonder why you never see any news stories about a white person being beaten or unlawfully injured by a white cop? For the same reason, they rarely bother to announce an Amber Alert on a black or Hispanic child. It's not news. It doesn't sell beer. And it doesn't help the government maintain a balance of internal disquiet. As long as they can keep all of us second-guessing each other and ourselves, it gives us less time and energy to worry about what they're doing. And why do they want everything to be that way? Mainly because they're bigger idiots than we are. They just have the power to try to cover up their own ineptitude. Why do you think we have so many rich lawyers in this country? Because our leaders are even bigger dumb fucks than we are. So, if they can keep us squabbling amongst ourselves by undermining law enforcement and creating an artificial air of us against them in the press, they're going to take advantage of it, and they'll push it right to the edge, because that's what politicians do. So what's the big answer? Well, honestly, there ain't one. Not for this issue. Too many levels. It's too nuanced, and there's too much willful ignorance and misinformation on all sides to just hit the easy button. However, there is a couple of things we can do to try to make it better. First, language. Words are important, and they are powerful, but it's a really bad idea to give certain words more power than they deserve. For one thing, when you give a racial or sociological epithet the power to make you angry or to hurt you, you've basically handed a loaded gun to those who would use those words specifically for that purpose. Take the fucking bullets out. All right, numbnuts? Don't give the word the power to hurt you in the first place. It's a choice, and you have absolute control over what it can do to you. Don't let it affect you when somebody calls you a Jew or a fag or the N-word. Don't react other than to shake your head in pity at the pathetic ignoramus that would stoop so low to try to use that word as a fucking weapon. Words like that are only weapons for the ignorant to use against the ignorant. Don't be fucking ignorant. Don't give the N-word, or any word for that matter, more power over you than it fucking deserves. And don't be a hypocrite, screaming 1 minute about how awful the word is, then 5 minutes later using it as a term of endearment when your buddies show up. That just makes you look like a fucking idiot. Second, don't buy the hype. About 95% of law enforcement personnel are just out there trying to keep people safe. Yes, there are some fucking power-mad shitheads out there, and they need to have their badges and guns taken away from them as soon as possible. But when you start blaming all cops for the actions of a few, you're just as bad as the white people who look at blackface and see nothing but a gangbanger from an old T.J. Hooker episode. Third, don't assume that just because a cop shoots a black person that A, the cop is white, and B, the person who was shot wasn't earning their lead paycheck. You need to realize that there are bad people in every single goddamn demographic. Some of those bad people are white. Some of those bad people are black. Some are cops, and some are civilians. Some are left-handed dentists from Baltimore with a hair lip and a slight limp. If you're watching this, and you are a left-handed dentist from Baltimore with a hair lip and a slight limp, I'm not necessarily talking about you, but I could be. The fact is, we're all human, and the more we allow ourselves to get caught up in our differences based on theological belief or skin tone, or any of that shit for that matter, the deeper of a hole we are all digging ourselves. If we allow ourselves to let this sorry species go extinct because we can't get our shit together for 5 minutes, then it's really true. No lives matter. Sleep on that tonight, and I'll see you next week.
Angry Men Reviews. Many fucks said, no fucks given.
Dirty fuck!
Preachy, preachy, preachy. Preach, preach, preach. I sometimes don't know when to stop myself, but hey. That concludes today's filming for That Damn Rant Show.